For centuries, the Iron Throne had no more loyal ally than the princes of Dorne. Since we had never fallen to them, we kept our ancestral title. Perhaps this is what drew Rhaegar Targaryen to us. His royal parents had not produced a sister for him to wed, so he had to look elsewhere for a princess. And there was only one in Westeros, Elia of House Martell, my sister. She was not the most beautiful woman in the world or even in Dorne, but rare for a woman from our land, her flower came with no thorns. She was kind and clever, with a gentle heart. I loved her. I feared for her. For years I fended off lesser men from her. But when Rhaegar came, even I failed. He was beautiful and the crowned prince of the Seven Kingdoms, and our mother had worked so hard to secure the match, how could Elia not accept him? They were wed, and he took her from her home, from those who loved her and would die for her, and locked her in his red keep above his sty of a city surrounded by false friends. She bore him a daughter and a son, though each almost cost her her life. Elia loved Rhaegar. She obeyed him, and he chose to steal away Lyanna Stark, a pale northern girl whose veins ran with ice like all her people. Instead of disciplining his faithless son, King Aerys executed the Starks when they came seeking justice, and ignited a revolt. I know how the Maesters describe the war now, but calling it Robert's Rebellion does not change what it was, the War of the Usurper. Dorne sided with the crown, for when we swear oaths, we keep them. We needed no threats from King Aerys, though he made them anyway, locking Elia and her children in the Red Keep to ensure our loyalty. Even in his madness, he knew that no true Dornishman would ever take up arms against our beloved princess, and that we would fight to the death for whichever side she was on.
A plan was devised. Prince Rhaegar would personally lead the royal forces, now reinforced with 10,000 Dornishmen, north to face Robert. Of the King's Guard, Luan Martell and I would ride with the prince.
At the Trident, Dorne lost 10,000 men and 2 princes. My uncle in the King's Guard and Elia's gallant husband, Prince Rhaegar, who was too slow or too arrogant for Robert's war hammer. As Robert's army marched on King's Landing, the Mad King sent his own wife and child away, but kept my sister and hers inside. In his madness, Aerys thought that the Dornish had betrayed his son at the Trident, and was only too happy to welcome his one true friend back into his ranks, Tywin Lannister. Lord Tywin's army sacked his friend's city while Lord Tywin's son murdered the king he'd sworn to protect. All this could have been forgiven. War is terrible, and men must become terrible to wage it. But the Lannisters knew that as long as my sister and her children, Prince Rhaegar's heirs, lived, no usurper could safely sit the throne. So Lord Tywin's dog, Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, made Elia watch as he murdered her daughter and dashed her infant son's head against a wall. Then, with her baby's blood still on his hands, and murdered her. When Lord Tywin later presented their bodies to Robert Baratheon wrapped in pretty Lannister cloaks, I have been told the red color graciously hid the blood from men's eyes. The Targaryens talk of fire and blood. In Dorne, our blood is fire. If Robert Baratheon had dared set foot in Dorne during his reign, he would have lost the foot. When I was a boy of 16, a great lord caught me with his mistress. He should have been honored. Instead, the fat old fool challenged me to a duel, thanks to my age and status, only to first blood. But his mistress and his wife warned me which of my parts he intended to draw first blood from. He was strong and fierce, but slow. I caught him quickly, and the duel ended with honor satisfied. Then his wounds festered, and he died. Ever since, men have called me the Red Viper, a name that never fails to draw a laugh from me, as if a single serpent was all I knew of venom.
Westeros has mighty rivers, but none of them compare to the Rhoyne, It is said that there is no stream or puddle in western Essos but drains to Mother Royne. No doubt an exaggeration. Until one sees the river, at its widest, a man in the center can't see a shore to either side. The greatest of Mother Royne's children were the Royner, a civilization as ancient and grand as old Guise. Fishers, traders, scholars, workers of wood, stone and metal. The Royner raised their elegant cities from the headwaters of the Royne down to her mouth, each lovelier than the last. For many centuries the Royner lived in relative peace. When invaders swept down from the hills, the Royner, women and men, would don silver-scaled armor, fish-head helms, tall spears, and turtle-shell shields. If the enemy did not laugh themselves away, it was said that Mother Royne would whisper the enemy's secrets to her children, and the Roynish wizards could raise watery walls to drown their foes. Whatever magic the Royner may have had, it wasn't enough. When Valyrian colonists first arrived, the Royner embraced them, for all men were welcome to share the bounty of Mother Royne. Perhaps a water people should have been more cautious of strangers who exalted fire and blood. Legend has it that one day the Valyrians netted and butchered one of the giant turtles the Royner held sacred. As a result, thousands were killed or enslaved, cities and towns were burned, drowned and rebuilt. In these wars, the Valyrians emerged as victorious more often than not. The princes of the Roynish cities, fiercely proud of their independence, fought alone, whilst the Valyrian colonies aided one another. Eventually, the Roynish princes ceased their squabbling and united behind Prince Garren, who led the largest army Essos had ever seen, against 100,000 Valyrian colonists, 100 war elephants, and 3 dragon lords. Thousands burned, but thousands more sheltered in the shallows of the river, whilst the Roynish wizards raised enormous water spouts against the foe's dragons. Roynish archers brought down 2 of the dragons, whilst the 3rd fled, wounded. And thereafter, the Royner named Garren the Great. But Mother Valyria proved just as caring as Mother Royne. When Garren the Great marched his army against Volantis, 300 Valyrian dragons descended from the sky. Tens of thousands burned whilst others rushed into the river, but the fires burned so hot that the water boiled and turned to steam. Garren the Great was captured alive and made to watch as Valyrians butchered every last man, so many that their blood turned the great harbor of Volantis red as far as the eye could see. Then they forced Garren to watch as they marched on his own city and enslaved all the women and children his army had left behind. The singers claim that Prince Garren called out Mother Royne to curse the Valyrians, and she in turn flooded the city with foul waters and a damp fog that caused the skin of the Valyrians to harden and crack, and thus was born Greyscale. Fearing a similar fate, another Roynish ruler, Princess Nymeria, led her own people into every ship, skiff and raft they had, and fled Essos. Eventually, after much hardship, they landed in sun-swept and bone-dry Dorne. But we all know that tale.
She was lucky to land in Dorne, where powerful women are not locked away in septs and the beds of old men. My ancestor Mors Martell saw her and desired her, and proved that where armies fail, a tongue may succeed. Wedding his strength to hers, his spear to her son, they subdued all his rivals together. After the tradition of her people, House Martell then ruled Dorne as princes, not kings. Unless the eldest child was a daughter, for unlike the rest of Westeros, we follow a prince or a princess Martell just the same. And we always have. Some people forget that Aegon Targaryen crowned himself lord of 6 kingdoms, not 7. When his sister marched on Dorne, she found no mighty hosts drawn up against her for her dragon to burn and her soldiers to slaughter. The sands swirled, men died, and her dragon saw nothing. The sun shone, men died, and her dragon bowed to our greater fire. The Targaryens retreated with their tails tucked between their legs. Of course, in later years, his descendants would try again. Daeron the First succeeded at great cost and reigned in Dorne for a few glorious months. One night, his steward pulled down a sash by his bed to summon his consorts. Instead, the canopy split open and 100 red scorpions fell on him. He was a Tyrell. You would think he would be used to getting stung. Within a fortnight, House Martell again ruled a free Dorne.